things off. But as I said, it's really great to see you all. If you can turn your cameras on, that would be great too. We have lots of our talent team here today to speak with you about careers in Web3 and also some CV tips as well. So hopefully this will be a really useful session for you outside of the hackathon as well, but also potentially give you some tips for your projects. Quickly, before I hand over to Laura, I'd just love to say if you could reach out to me, let me know how your project is going. We do enjoy hearing about your different projects. If you have any issues or questions for me, again, please reach out and I'll do my best to get those answered for you. I'll drop all of the links in the chat as usual. And so, yeah, once we kick things off, we should have access to those. But Laura, that's everything from me. So I'd love to hand over to you to introduce yourself and get the session started.
Thanks, Rory. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you all. I think there's a few people that I recognise. Actually, quite a lot of you. Nice to see everyone. So for those that I've not met before, my name's Laura. I run the talent team at Encode, so supporting everybody who's done our programs in taking their next steps after Encode or during Encode, depending on where you are. Quickly to introduce the rest of the team. So we've luckily got a couple of others from the talent team, as Rory said, with us today. So we've got Johanna. Wave, Johanna. Who's a fantastic addition to the team, and also Zara, who recently joined the talent team as well. So let me quickly share my screen and I'll just tell you a little bit more about what we're going to cover in the next kind of 45 minutes to an hour. Here we go. Da-da-da. Right. Slideshow. Cool. Can everyone see this?
Perfect.
Fabulous. Thank you. Perfect. So what we're going to do today is 30 minutes of workshop. So I'm going to just talk to you a bit about kind of the basics of setting up a new resume, which is specifically tailored towards the Web3 ecosystem. And then once we've done that, we're going to split in some breakout rooms. So what we're going to do is each of us are going to go, depending on how confident you are, we can kind of go off and do some one-to-one CV feedback, or we can do some group work as well. The preference is group work. I know it feels a bit daunting, but it's really good to learn from everyone else. So if we can kind of share our experiences and learn from each other, it would be really, really helpful. So that's that. So we've got about half an hour, well, 25 minutes now to run over some of the basics, and we'll move into the CV support and workshop. So first of all, when you're thinking about your CV, you might think like, where should I actually build it? This is a tool that I've kind of been using for a while, and I think it's a really useful place to start when you're like, oh, I don't know how to kind of put things here, don't know how to make it look nice, don't want to just have a plain old boring kind of Word document. Obviously, each their own, people can do whatever they like, but this is just my recommendation. So it's just a free tool called Canva. For those that don't know, it's just a kind of basic design tool. But you can go on there and there's like thousands and thousands and thousands of different templates that you can choose from. So find something that kind of resonates with you as an individual. It might be something more kind of colorful if you're more into design. If you're more of a kind of analytical type, you might go for something a bit more plain. Up to you. I'm not stereotyping anyone. But feel free to go on there, find something that works for you, something that allows you to kind of fit all the content in that you want to include in your CV, and then you can take it from there. So next part, we're going to think about what sections that you want to include in your CV. So most of these you'll be familiar with, but I'm just going to run through them so you have an idea and give my kind of take on each section in terms of like what should be included, what shouldn't be included, how you might want to actually display the content and actually produce the content from the beginning. So first things first, all of these sections are pretty much interchangeable in terms of like where they're placed in the CV, in my opinion. So these just like sections that should technically be included. So 7 sections. Usually you'd put the contact details and the personal summary at the top, but then after that you can kind of shuffle things around depending on your experience, what parts you really want to show off. So for example, if you're someone like Zara, who is highly educated, and should be very proud of her achievements thus far, she might want to kind of put her education and her technical skills further up her CV than potentially her work experience or kind of projects that she's worked on. So in comparison to that, if you, for example, have had kind of 10-year career as a software developer in Web2, and that's where most of your experience lies, then you might want to put your work experience on top of your education. So these things can kind of be shuffled around. Also, depending on how you want to format it, if you've got 2 columns, you might want to shuffle things up and down, give some parts more airtime than others. Obviously, it's all kind of prime real estate. If you're trying to fit your CV into kind of like 1 page, maybe 2, you want to think about where things are placed, what you want people's attention to be drawn to. A really kind of frightening fact about CVs is on average, people only spend about 15 seconds looking at them. So if you think about it in that respect, you want to be showing off the best parts of your CV near the top, so where your eye is drawn to. So to kind of move on from that, in terms of your contact details, what you're going to include will obviously be your name, potentially. If you're anonymous, just make sure there's some way of contacting you. So you'll have your CV, on your CV, you'll have your name, your like email address or some way of getting in touch. You might have a portfolio, your GitHub, your LinkedIn, any other things that you really want to show. So it might be some like freelance platform that you've been using where you can kind of record things you've worked on. If you're a technical writer, it might be some kind of like blog page. Whatever it is, this is where you're going to kind of post those pages that are kind of centric to you. Again, you can order those in whatever shape, fashion you want, making sure the most important ones are at the top. How I kind of see a CV is that it's almost like a landing page. So if you think of it like a landing page, like the first thing I do when I get a CV is basically open people's LinkedIn, because I just want to have an extra nose, see if people have got anything else going on that isn't like apparent on their CV. I'll open their portfolio, I'll open their GitHub. So if you think about it like that, I'll just go onto the landing page, CV, open all of them up, and then have a really good nose through everything. So it's important to include those details on your CV if possible. Next one is your personal summary. So going back to kind of the 15 seconds of reading time, I think personal summary is something that not everybody includes in their CV, but I think it's pretty important for people that aren't actually spending too much time reviewing your profile. So this is basically where you're just going to really draw someone's attention. It might be some key facts about you, some things that you've worked on. If you're at a bit of a loss as to what to include, a kind of easy tip for this one is to split it into 3 sentences. So it's going to be relatively short. It's not going to be like a big ginormous paragraph about you taking a quarter of the page. It's going to be short, concise facts. If you've got 3 sentences, those sentences will be relatively short. You could split it into kind of past experience, present experience, future. So like what you're looking to do next. So it might be, currently a student studying at whatever. Maybe you're just about to graduate. You're, recently finished a degree in computer science from X, Y, and Z. Currently, in the process of learning more about Web3, taking part in uni hack or whatever programs you're doing the Solidity bootcamp, looking to find a Solidity developer position in a crypto protocol, whatever it might be. One thing to add is that you want it to be pretty individual to you. So that was potentially a bit generic. So what you'll be looking to do is make sure there's some interesting facts about you. So if you can include any like quantitative data, so graduated first in my class from whatever university it might be, won X hackathon prize in my first ever crypto hackathon, whatever these small interesting facts are about you. Oh, working on a project to do with like liquid staking, whatever it might be, like, just trying to build a bit more of a flavor around you and the kind of person that you are. So that is the personal summary. Also, feel free to drop some questions into the chat as we go, and I'll kind of intermittently, I'll get away from Rory. I'm sure if there's anything interesting that I need to acknowledge at this point. But if not, we'll take some questions at the end. But yeah, feel free to drop those in as we go. So that's the personal summary. So if you imagine you've got your A4 piece of paper, you've done your contact details, you've done your personal summary. Next, you're going to think about potentially your education, your work experience, your projects. So work experience, pretty much standard. You want to include the kind of job title, where you worked in terms of the company, the location of that company can be quite useful, and the dates, including the months. A lot of people just put the years, and I feel like it looks a bit kind of like ambiguous when someone's like, I've worked at this company from 2017, 2018, and then another one from 2018 to 2019. First thing that comes to my head is probably an incorrect assumption, but my brain goes to thinking, well, if they're not telling me what months they've worked at this company, does that mean that they've only worked there for 2 months rather than 12 months? So in order to kind of avoid this kind of confusion or assumption, it's easier just to put all the information in. So we've got each of your work experiences, so each job that you've had in reverse chronological order. So your most recent experience at the top, your further back ones towards the bottom. Within that kind of each section of each job that you've worked on, you're going to want to think about the projects that you worked on, the results, the tasks, the actions, the kind of general things that you achieved whilst you were in those roles. So my advice usually is to kind of split it into maybe like 4, 5, 6 bullet points. Within each bullet point, you want to address what your task was, what actions you took, and what the results were that you achieved for each of those things. And again, try to be as like quantitative as possible. So if you were a social media marketer, you might say, one of my biggest tasks was to increase the Twitter following, and I did this through X, Y, and Z action in order to achieve a 300% growth month by month, or whatever it might be. So if you think about that in lots and lots of different scenarios, it builds quite a nice picture of the kind of work that you've done and the tasks that you've completed in your job. So think about that. And when you're doing this, I think a really easy way to get started, because I think this is actually the hardest part of writing a CV, is the work experience. Like everything else is pretty straightforward. You're like, well, these are just facts. But the work experience is kind of very subjective and difficult to kind of know what's the best things to talk about, like how to present it. So I usually for this part will just get a blank page and just scribble down loads of bullet points, just thinking like, what are the coolest projects that I've worked on? Like what things have I been really proud of in my role so far? And I'll just scribble all of those down. So you can just fill up. Don't worry about kind of formatting anything. Just get it all down. Then start building out each bullet point. So again, looking at that task, action, result. So how that system can work for each of those points. So you'll fill all those out. And then you want to just go through and cherry pick the ones that you think give the best flavor of you and what you're most keen to show off to the world. So that should hopefully help a little bit when it comes to building out that work experience section. Remember, like this is all of the kind of task of building the CV is to kind of show off your experience and obviously link that experience very heavily to what you want to do in the future. So the other thing that I would always be doing is kind of thinking in regards to the kinds of jobs that I was applying for, which things would be most appealing. Obviously, we're not talking about kind of manipulating the truth or telling people things that you've not done. These are things that you've achieved in your career. But obviously, some things will be potentially more valuable to a future employer than others. So have a think about it like that. Next part is your education. That's pretty straightforward. Don't go into too much detail here, unless your kind of thesis is on something incredibly relevant. Your kind of undergrad thesis, I'd probably say. If it's not something, or dissertation, whatever, I've forgotten what you call it now. But if it's not in something that's very relevant to what you're doing in the future, I wouldn't be overly keen on including it. I would just list out all your education from, depending on how far through higher education you've got. You might want to start at your, high school all the way through to kind of undergrad, master's, PhD, whatever it might be. But just, again, the name of the program that you've worked on, the institution that you completed the program with, and then the dates. Less important to include the month and year, but it can be quite nice to do that still at this point. So those are all the standard parts that you would have thought, yeah, in a normal Web2 CV, I was obviously going to include all of these things. And I would have probably set it out in a very similar way. I think one of the absolute key parts to a Web3 specific CV, especially if you're a technical person, is going to be your project section. So projects is probably one that you've not potentially seen before, but is very, very, very important. So this is where you're going to keep a kind of almost like a record of all of the personal projects that you've worked on, all the hackathon projects you've worked on, all the prizes that you've won, and just really showing off your interest in the space. I think that's pretty much one of the key points when you're trying to break into a new domain or industry, is like showing enthusiasm for that industry. If you don't have enthusiasm for what you're going to be potentially working in, it's very hard to get a job. And this is a really good way of showing evidence of the fact that you are enthusiastic about the domain that you're working in or you're trying to work in. So this is where you'd put, say, uni hack, prize winner, I won this bounty, like with this prize money. You would list the name of your project. You might hyperlink to a GitHub repository or a site, or however you're hosting that project. You might also want to include a quick description of the project. So, like, what were you trying to achieve? What was the overall function of the project? As a team, what did you go on to complete? How much did you work on it? And then remember to also include something about your own personal contribution to that project. So, if you are usually kind of a front end developer and you were specifically working on the front end, I did X, Y, and Z. I integrated this using X, Y, and Z technologies, and kind of show off that as well. It's also nice to include the tech stack that the project was built in. So projects 100% is very key, especially if you are a kind of graduate looking for your first position in the space. Like, this is really the thing that will make you stand out. 100,000,000%. Like, the graduates that I know that have gone on to do well in the space are the ones that have been very, very keen on building their own projects, and working really hard to kind of like make a name for themselves in the space, for sure. It's also very good evidence of your technical ability, because people can just go onto the GitHub link and actually have a look through your code. If you're potentially non-technical and say there's something, obviously you're probably going to still be involved in the same way with a project or doing something along those lines. It might be, if you're a community manager or somebody that's more of like an evangelist type, you might have set up your own meetup. You might have built your own community within your area or specific domain, whatever it might be. This is where you kind of can do a bit of showing off and show a company that you're, very much worth employing. The next part is your technical skill. So this is just basically a list of any frameworks and technologies that you're comfortable with. People tend to try to quantify their technical ability, but are usually slightly advise against that. So you can just list those technologies rather than actually quantifying your ability. When we quantify something, I think generally it kind of sets some kind of expectation either way. So if you're saying, you know, when I say quantify, I mean, you know, sometimes you see someone's put JavaScript and then they put a little slide bar, and it's kind of like a tiny little slice where they're basically saying that they don't know a huge amount about it. Whereas you might, if you kind of then compare that to your solidity ability, and you might say, oh, I've got like 90% solidity ability, like I'm amazing. You might then get to an interview and people are going to expect you to be able to answer some pretty like technical solidity based questions. So it's better just to not set that expectation. Like either you're kind of comfortable or you're not. And by comfortable, my advice is I wouldn't put something on your CV that you're not going to feel comfortable talking about or coding in / you know, on. That's my usual advice. And then finally, your interests. So just giving a bit more flavor of you as a character. So like, what do you do outside of work? Anything interesting? A few talking points can always be nice. I always love knowing like what people do when they're in their own free time. So it just gives you a bit of an understanding of them as a person rather than an employee. So that's that. So there, after that, you should have an idea of a few things that might be helpful. I've made a little slide of some top tips. So 5 things that I would advise. Again, this is my advice. You can take little bits from it. You can listen to all of it, whatever you like. So number 1, try and keep it to 1 page if possible. I know it can be a lot more tricky if you're kind of like 20 years into your career, but 1 page, especially if you're a graduate or soon to be graduate, like you shouldn't need more than 1 page to explain what you've been up to. If you're an academic or a PhD, you might want to take a second space to kind of include publications and articles and things like that. But apart from that, try and keep it to 1 page. You can make sure there's some keywords in there. So key things that you want people to see or you know should be included, make sure those are in there. Next one is PDF. One of my pet peeves is when people send me Word documents. I'm just like, oh, this is like an extra faff for me to then go and open this. So if you can save it as PDF and your name, key part, like please save your CV as your name, somebody, resume, date, whatever it is. Just don't save it as just CV. You'd be absolutely shocked at how many times I get that. And I'm like, oh, I wonder where Rory's CV is. And I'll like search Rory and it'll be like, won't come up. And I'm like, oh, CV. Oh, there it is. There's Rory, the title CV. Number 3, don't quantify your skill level. Just discuss that. 4, make sure you include your projects. Keep building, keep working, keep meeting people as well. We're not talking about networking and job searching in this one, but definitely going to all of these events, attending boot camps is very good for your network as well as your learning and you know, practice. And then obviously the really obvious one, double check spelling, formatting, give it to someone else, send it to us. We can go through them now. Make sure that everything is spick and span. There's nothing worse than a spelling mistake in a CV, and it just makes you look a bit silly. So that's all of my advice for now. Does anybody have any questions?
Everybody feel free to either type one in the chat or also to unmute yourself. If not, Laura, I'd love to ask one myself, just a general one. When you open a CV, what's the first thing that kind of stands out to you? Where do you first look? I think you mentioned typically there's only 15 seconds in the average review. So if I was going to make one section perfect, what would you recommend I do?
It's a good question. So I think I would focus pretty heavily on the top half of my CV if I was only going to be focusing on one part. So whatever you think is the most important part of your CV and you put it on the top half, make sure it's a good half. So I just make sure your personal summary is really snappy, interesting. I think what a big put off on the personal summary is when it's really generic, and I think to myself, well, it doesn't really say a lot about you. It doesn't really tell me more than I knew already. That's probably my key advice. Like, make sure your personal summary is looking sharp and snappy and includes any information that you really want to show off. And focus heavily on the top half of your CV if you're going to only do half of it.
Yeah, I guess as you say, it's kind of conveying that real passion and interest, which ultimately everybody who's part of this university hackathon does have. So just making sure that you kind of portray it in the right way on the CV. I feel like the hard work's already done. It's just finishing off that CV nicely. But until we have any more questions, I'm sure again after the breakout rooms, there'll be time for a quick Q&A with Laura. But as we mentioned, we're going to set up the breakout rooms now where Laura, Johanna, and Zara will be, and there'll be an opportunity for you to ask any questions. And also, yeah, if you're brave enough to show your own CV, and you can get some tips for that as well. So I'll just set up the breakout rooms now. Laura, do you
Yeah,
go for
just
it?
quickly before we jump into the breakout rooms, can everyone, I think you can put a hand, yeah, you can raise a hand on the Zoom for the people that don't have the video on. Who out of everyone has an up-to-date CV? Just raise your hand virtually if possible. 1, 2, 3. Anybody else? Okay. If everyone puts their hands down again, I might ask another quick question. So we're slightly putting people on the spot. So out of the 3 or 4 people who have CVs, how many people would be happy sharing that with the group as an example, and being critiqued by the team? 1, 2, 3. Well done, guys. I know it's private, but it's a really, really helpful task to get more eyes on the document itself. Like, the more feedback you can get is always great. So well done. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll split into 3 groups, and we'll try to split the 3 people who have CVs and are happy to share into 3 groups, if that's okay, Rory.
Welcome back. Good to see you all. I'm just going to give it a little longer in case anyone's stuck in a room, but I think that's everybody back now. So Laura, I don't know if you have any kind of final remarks or any tips that you would like to add before we wrap up the session.
I was just going to say, I'm going to pop my contact details into the chat quickly. So if anyone does have any more questions or wants to reach out about extra help, there's that. The other things that I wanted to just point you in the direction of were, we have, where is this? So we actually have a kind of recruitment form. So with that form, if you fill that out, somebody in the talent team will actually reach out to you directly to schedule a one-to-one meeting, and give you some more support. So I'm going to pop that in the chat as well. That's probably the easiest way to go. I've also popped my Discord and my Twitter in there. On Twitter, I kind of put some useful bits, some new jobs, any new partners that we're working with at Encode. The other thing to definitely keep an eye on is our job board. So if you go into the Discord server, there's a section that's all filled with jobs from our company partners. So new jobs, job board, we split it by job role, and then also split it by company, for which companies are hiring for what role. So you can basically apply for anything that you like through there. Those applications are shared directly with our partner companies, and then we'll reach out to you directly to set up some interviews if you're successful. So obviously feel free to check those out. the other thing that I've forgotten to say as well, for those that haven't seen, we're running a job fair, a virtual job fair on the 13th of October. Let me quickly find you a link to that. So lots of awesome companies will be going to that. So we have a lot of our partner companies who are hiring already, and then we're also going to have a few new brands that are pretty exciting. Last time we had 42 companies. I think it was 150 open job opportunities, and then about 500 attendees, which was very, very fun indeed. So I'm going to pop that in the channel for you guys as well. But that's everything from me. Thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it. And obviously love seeing you all. And feel free to get in contact with Zara, Johanna, or me, or obviously Rory in future if you do want any more help. So thanks. And I think Rory wants to talk to you a little bit more about programs, I believe.
Yes, of course. So yeah, I'd just like to say thank you very much on the behalf of all the participants here. So Laura, Zara, Johanna, thank you for kind of all the tips on the CVs. I do hope that everybody feels well equipped now for their future CVs and applications which they might be sending off. Obviously, feel free to use any of the links which Laura has just dropped in the chat for any kind of talent and career questions you may have. But equally, the deadline for the university hack is fast approaching. So I'm aware you might have questions for myself too. So please do feel free to reach out on Discord or book a call in, and we can help you with those bounties or any questions you may have. But yeah, do keep in touch. Really great to see you all once again today. And yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. So thank you again to the team, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.